Welcome to Kopi Time, a podcast series on markets and economies from DGS Group Research. I'm Taimur Beg, Chief Economist, welcoming you to our 98th episode. Today, we will put aside most of global macro. There will be a little bit of it, but mostly it will be not the usual global macro that we talk about, because we will delve into the world of tech startups. Prem Bhatia is co-founder of Graas, which was recently named by CB Insights to its annual Retail Tech 100 list, showcasing the 100 most promising private retail tech companies in the world. According to Graas's website, it is a growth as a service technology solution provider using predictive AI to help enhance the growth of e-commerce businesses. Its proprietary platform integrates previously siloed e-commerce data, but more about all that from Prem in a second. But before Graas, Prem founded several companies, served at the board of several more, and has been deeply involved in tech investment. Prem Bhatia, welcome to Kopi Time.
Thank you very much, Taimur. Big fan. I started listening back in the early days of COVID and haven't stopped, so pleasure to be here.
I've spoken with your partner and some of your employees, and that has made me a fan of yours as well. Prem, we will talk a lot about your journey as a tech entrepreneur, Graas, the startup scene, and so on. I really would love to hear about your insights on all of that. But first, we're discussing this in the middle of March. A few things have happened in the form of Silicon Valley Bank and a few other banks that have got under. So talk to us about its impact on the tech startup scene.
I think two lenses to it. I think as a depositor, it's really quite worrying that you can deposit money in a bank that you trust and then one day wake up and not be able to withdraw, right? That is obviously extremely worrying. I think the other lens is that as a technology startup, if this were to continue along with high interest rates, I worry about the venture capital ecosystem and the ability for other entrepreneurs and startups to raise money. Things have fundamentally changed from 12 months ago, since we raised money at least.
Right. So let's stay with that a little longer. So my understanding is 2 Fridays ago, when the SVB issue was front and center, a lot of VCs lobbied Washington, D.C. very hard. And their point was that in SVB, you have a lot of startups and tech companies with much more than $250,000 deposits, and SVB going under without taking care of those depositors would be very, very problematic. What were you hearing from your peers, or perhaps even you had some exposure to SVB? I mean, what was the mindset in those days?
Fortunately, no.
Good.
We are DBS, born and bred.
Very nice.
I think, everyone's worried about what if they have made this mistake. What is the mistake? The mistake is they managed risk badly.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know where DBS is my bank. I don't know where DBS invests, right? And everyone is now worried. It's fundamental, right? This is existential almost. That if you have to now double click on where your bank invests and whether there's timing mismatch to your deposits, are they at risk, right? And that's really what is scaring everybody. I think that, at a more macro level, we're sort of just seeing the after effects of the COVID hangover.
Right.
We saw a prolonged period of zero interest rates. We saw a lot of liquidity in the system. We saw some fast and loose bets being made during that, 0% interest rate regime. And now you've got a Fed which is basically taking up interest rates fast, right? And you're going to see the after effects not just in banking but in every single sector.
Right.
But I would have thought that banks would have been able to manage risk better. Long story short, and now I think you're faced with a sort of a question on whether banks that invested in crypto, for example, should they be backstopped by the government or their depositors be backstopped? And it's an interesting time. It's reminiscent of 2008 in some respects, hopefully nowhere near as bad, where in 2008, a lot of it was banks and housing, right? And now it's sort of banks and technology. And I think that, a lot of people have climbed all over venture capital. And I don't know, I have a fairly contrarian opinion.
Right. No, we're going to get into that in greater detail. Talking to people in Silicon Valley, which I'm sure you did during that time, was your sense that there were a lot of companies which only had business with SVB, and therefore, if SVB collapsed, they would not be able to make payroll? Or was it exaggerated that actually companies had multiple banks?
No, I think it was quite the opposite. I think SVB was home not just to funds, but also to their portfolio companies. And hindsight's a great thing. But look, at the end of the day, startups, they've got a lot to worry about. It's a bit like you're dancing between raindrops, trying not to get wet. And the last thing you need to worry about is managing multiple banking entities. I think most of them struggle with payroll and are still worried about when their money and how it's going to come back. I don't think it's a straightforward process.
Right. The guarantee is there, but that doesn't mean that everything can be withdrawn.
Cash flow is cash flow.
Yes, naturally.
And I think right now, for startup founders, I think 2021 was very much about growth at all costs. 2022, 2023, very much about survival, runway, cash flow, margin, cash flow is cash flow.
That's a good thing.
I agree. I think at a fundraising level, we've raised $50 million so far. Let me just put it this way, 40 million, the first 40, much easier than the last 10. Investors, their LPs, everyone is looking at unit economics and profitability with a magnifying glass. And that was not the case 2 years ago.
Right. I mean, one wonders whether the good thing also has some downside, which is that you do want a lot of creative destruction and free germination of ideas and very eager money. If that were to get constrained a little bit, maybe that puts some dark cloud for the outlook that, we won't have that many interesting things percolating through the system because a fear of failure would constrain money going in.
Yes. I mean, look, I think if you total up all venture capital globally, right, it's 2021 was about $700 billion, right? But I think it's settling at that $400 billion number annually. And you got to ask yourself, right, 400 billion on a global GDP of 100 trillion, right? That is your investment in innovation. And if that dries up, I think that, innovation in its truest sense, whether it's climate change, whether it's health, whether it's commerce, whether it's financial inclusion, that will slow down. There's some much larger implications than short-term blame.
Right. No, which is, I think, why we have seen regulators, particularly in the U.S., not necessarily go with the playbook of just letting people who have more than $250,000 under the bus, because I think those are the concerns echoing through them to some extent. All right, Prem, your journey. Yeah. Are we going to start talking about cricket, or are we going to talk about something even before that?
Yeah, I mean, we can start anywhere you like. Where would you like to start?
Well, tell us about your journey. What brought you to Graas, going back to, say, 23 years?
Oh, man, loaded question. So I guess my journey, to borrow from Hollywood, has been, I went from Mad Men and Maguire to today, Moneyball and Minority Report.
I hope everybody got that one. I got it. Okay.
Let me explain, right? So, grew up in very much in a marketing family. Dad was one job only all his life at Unilever. Mom worked at an agency. Started off in advertising, moved into what embarrassed my father, which was something called sports marketing, and managing celebrities like the likes of Tendulkar and Ganguly and Shoaib Akhtar. And he was embarrassed until the movie Jerry Maguire came out, and then it became the new sexy thing to do. And yeah, ran that. Was fortunate, had an exit early in my 20s, and then went on to found tech and digital marketing companies across India and Southeast Asia and the Valley, and now very firmly ensconced in the world of data and artificial intelligence, but with a marketing twist. So marketing has run through I think it's a common thread, I guess, that's run through my existence.
Right. Listen, Prem, I want to talk about Graas, of course, but before that, so staying with that issue of your sort of journey over the last 2 decades, I see that, you also advise a lot of companies and you also act as a direct investor in certain startups. So those things are also with a marketing lens, or you do some other stuff as well?
Yeah, I mean, myself and my co-founder, Ashwin, we've been advising and investing in multiple startups for a few years, but more often than not, it's startups that, where we can add value. They're typically seed stage investments, anywhere up to like $500,000. And yes, I would say marketing is the common thread because we're investing in companies that have some consumer-facing business, advertising included.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about Graas and let's see how that sort of culminates everything that you've been doing the last 2 decades.
So Graas actually is a sort of an acronym for growth as a service, which is a nice play on SaaS. And very simply put, we help companies grow online. We help them grow top line, and we help them manage margin. And we use artificial intelligence and automation to do it. So we take gut instinct out of the equation, and we automate their decision making via data. We're not your typical startup. Graas raised money in April 22. We acquired 2 software companies. Our thesis was that retail and e-commerce and advertising are going to become one and the same thing. And our thesis from 2 years ago, I think, has come true. And we'll go into that in a second. And yeah, I think we're also... Geography is important, unlike the US, which, when you look at a country's GDP, you look at, let's say, at a global level, let's say the world does 100 trillion in GDP. Retail is probably about 30 trillion. E-commerce is probably 6 on that 30 trillion, right? It'll vary by country and region, but we play from Mumbai to Manila, where you're looking at a combined GDP of about 7 trillion. 30% of that maybe is retail, but e-commerce is only $200 billion. And so there's a lot of room for growth. Now, what's peculiar is that in this part of the world, unlike the US or China, in the US, to do well online, you sort of, you have Amazon, you have maybe Shopify, and in China you have Baba and you have JD.com. But for some reason, in India and Southeast Asia, you have a very peculiar scenario where you have some of the world's largest companies going head to head for 2 things. One is e-commerce wallet spend. The other is advertising dollars. And so you have Amazon, you have Reliance, you have Tencent, you have Alibaba, you have the C Group, you have TikTok, you have Google, you have Facebook, you have all these juggernauts playing in this arena. And so when players of that intelligence, capitalization, and sophistication play in the same arena, the only people who lose out actually are the people selling online, the brands, the companies, the small and medium-sized businesses. And so we're here to try and level the playing field via AI.
Okay, I'm going to give you a hypothetical.
Yeah.
It's not entirely hypothetical because I know the company.
Okay.
So this friend of mine, he's trying to set up as a fledgling company. It's about sports content.
Okay.
Based out of Singapore, broadcast sports content, but he has to face ESPNs and the big TV networks of the world. And so if he were to come to you and say that, I have, some approvals from the regulators to capture local sports content, but I have no idea how to monetize this. Who in Singapore wants to watch like school sports or Premier League of Singapore for football or something like that. Again, we have not prepared for this at all. I'm just asking completely extempore. What kind of, sort of strategy would you help a company like that do? Because you're talking about smallish company.
Yeah. So he's not doing e-commerce. He's doing content.
Right. But he wants to hopefully, get a subscription service and sell it to people and that sort of stuff, or sell it to other large content managers in the world that content.
So that I think is more sort of under SaaS or subscription services, and I mean it's not easy right now.
No, it's not. Notice that already from
you're seeing. So you've got basically essentially two monetization models. You have subscription and you have advertising, and sometimes you have a hybrid. And advertising is obviously based on, it used to be based on eyeballs and how many people watch.
But
today it's based on how many people buy.
Correct.
Right? So a little more difficult for a generic content operator like a Netflix to make the, to tie the loop between watching something and buying something.
Right.
So that leaves the other business model, which is subscription as a service or SaaS. Look, the reality is that in India and Southeast Asia, SaaS has just started. You literally have, a handful of companies that have exited IPO or in terms of acquisition. But the important thing is that it has started. And the region doesn't have the depth of, say, a US, but it only started 2, 3, 4 years ago, maybe 5, and we're seeing a lot of innovation in the SaaS space in terms of a monetization model. So my advice to him would be, it's difficult. Right. Content is just a very, very difficult business.
Very investment intensive.
Long payback periods. And so be patient, find your niche.
Right.
But you say this and then you say, and then you have what I thought was almost impossible, where, you have influencers like a Mr. Beast, who every time they put out something is watched more times than the Super Bowl.
My 10-year-old is an avid viewer. Yes. So
Kim Kardashian, another one. Every time she puts out something, it's watched by more people than the Super Bowl or the IPL. So you got to find that scale.
Right.
Right. Or you've got to go deep into a niche, I guess.
Okay, Prem, this might be a little closer to your heart. So I recently was in Bangladesh and we met a B2B company.
Yeah.
They are trying to become like the original form of Alibaba, which is bring brands to their marketplace and then connect these brands to retail stores in which they have good data and information about, what is their demand side. And they're trying to get, like, say, a Unilever to Bangladesh and then market their products. They probably can benefit a lot from market intelligence and user data and so on. So your AI thread, how does that sort of feed in?
So I'll tell you a story about how Graas started and the moment at which I thought this is now something very real and worth pursuing. I was talking to, I'm not going to name names, but a very senior chief marketing officer of one of the FMCG companies in Asia. And he said to me, he said, if you ask me how many chocolates I sold today in Vietnam on how many different channels, website, marketplace, or how much chocolate was lying in my warehouse, or how much Facebook or Google or TikTok contributed towards the sale of that chocolate, he said it would take me the best part of 2 weeks to find the answer. And I was like, wow, if a company of this size has that problem, I wonder what's happening with smaller companies. And so we went and asked, dozens of e-commerce heads and CEOs, and the response was identical, which is that it is almost impossible for companies to put all the different data sources together. They're very much in silos. So that's problem number one, collecting the data.
Yeah.
Problem number two is, what do you do with the data, right? And that's really where data science, data engineering, and AI come in. So I think India and Asia, or Southeast Asia, we're at the start of the journey where companies are understanding the power of data and putting it all together. But I would say, if you had to ask me, I'd say less than 10% of companies in this region have understood how important data is, how to put it together, and what to do with it. So it's very much the start of the journey.
Right. So Prem, I am a prime example of this complication. I recognize the value of data, but this podcast, for example, will go out on a podcast platform, Apple, Google, Spotify, etc. It'll go out on YouTube. And there's a DBS website in which there will be some of my clients who will come and download the podcast or watch the PDF version or the audio version. I can't consolidate all this. I cannot. So for me, if you were to ask me a week from now, hey, Timur, how did the podcast go? I'll be able to give you some isolated answers about how much download was done through a specific podcast platform, but I will not be able to consolidate. It'll take me also hours.
But you're not alone. You're not alone. A lot of people won't admit it, but they're in exactly the same position. I mean, I think that, if you, again, pull back for a second and you look at what's happened over the last 20 or 30 years, I think that, there have been sort of 3-4 mass mega trends, right? I think thanks to Nokia and then Steve Jobs, I think mobile and mobile internet, to be specific, was the big theme in the 2000s, right? I think that somewhere in the succeeding decade, that mega trend became the cloud, right? And then I think the next trend is AI. I mean, there was smaller maybe trends like crypto and Web3 and the metaverse, and who knows how that will play out. But I think that AI is the next mega trend, and you're seeing with ChatGPT and all that.
Right.
But I think it all begins with putting all the data together.
Right.
And that's really what Graas does. We're helping companies put their data together. We're helping them make decisions based on that data in real time. And we're taking gut instinct out of the equation and automating a lot of those decisions.
Right. No, so you're at the cutting edge, because I think that's a big hole right now. That even in my podcast example, technically speaking, it's all out there.
Yeah.
But I don't have a neat set of APIs or a consolidator out there to give me a full picture at any real time, a given moment. Okay, so that certainly tells us a bit about Graas, and you talked about your fundraising round. So congratulations on the 50 million fundraising.
Thank you.
So given that companies right now are going to be struggling either in terms of higher cost or the availability itself, give us a sense of the startup scene. maybe not necessarily just what's happening right now, but overall, are you excited by South Asia and Southeast Asia startup scene right now?
Yeah, look, I meet about 100, maybe 50 to 100 founders every month across, 7 countries that we operate in. And it is hot. I mean, it is, the innovation that's happening is, honestly, for me, I'm 48 years old. I haven't seen the volume of innovation happening at the startup level. But I think that what's happened over the last couple of weeks is really worrying, because if venture capital dries up, what happens then? At the end of the day, I have a question for you, right? If you were a billionaire, and maybe you are,
Good one.
but if you were a billionaire, would you rather put put your money into a fixed deposit at 5%, or give it to a venture capitalist in the hope that he could return 20% IRR, triple your money
Right.
in 5 years? It's a tough call right now. And so my question to you is that I don't think most founders, or if any founders, have ever seen a global situation in which interest rates may remain between 5 and 10% for the next 5 years. What happens?
Right. Prem, I don't want to come across as utterly pessimistic, because, I am with a founder and I know founders tend to be optimistic. But in this particular instance, I have no way of sugarcoating the answer. The choice that you mentioned, I think the answer is very clear. It's the 5%. The zero rate environment enabled a lot of things that you and I think will agree that, whether there was excess or not, it created an unleashing of capital to all sorts of projects. And that was, even if there were excesses, it had an overall positive impact, to your point that, the scene became hot. And there are all these, dreamers and thinkers and entrepreneurs bringing their thoughts and ideas together. And there was a flow of capital that was available for them. It's going to be difficult. I spent earlier today talking about the impact of the SVB collapse. And we can talk about a wide range of impacts, but the bottom line is it translates into higher cost of capital. And that higher cost of capital changes a wide range of calculations in terms of ROE, in terms of margin, and so on. But that takes me back to my question for you, that when you look at entrepreneurs...
Sorry, I had one question.
Oh, sure. Okay.
As a follow-up.
Yeah, all right.
So the flip side to that is that valuations have halved.
Yes.
Right? It's a great time to be investing in younger companies, right? And so 5% versus a curated list of investments,
Right.
That could be the home run. It's not that easy a call, right?
Okay, so I met an investor who's on that camp yesterday, and that investor was basically saying that, but it was not your typical investor. It was a family office. They've been successful. They have a lot of cash. And they rather bluntly told me that they're waiting for the crash because they want to deploy capital and they want to buy a lot of things, to your point, because they felt that the valuations were excessive in recent years. And they don't think the valuation adjustment is done, but they have a lot of dry powder and they will deploy it. My response to them was that if there are many people like you, then maybe the valuation will not go down much further because people are sniffing around and looking for value.
Yeah, well, I hope one way or the... obviously hope that interest rates do come down.
Correct.
Which allows LPs of investors in venture capital to be a bit more bullish. But I do worry, as I said earlier, if venture capital as an ecosystem dries up, I think it'll have a fundamental effect on global innovation. And innovation that, it could be in healthcare, could be in climate change, it could be in science, commerce, financial inclusion. And that really is the worry.
Right.
Because if that dries up and that innovation evaporates or slows down, that's not good for anyone, I think.
Exactly. So I just want to stay with that Southeast Asia startup scene a little longer, given that, you literally meet hundreds of founders on a regular basis and you look at their books, or their playbooks rather. Margin. Are these e-commerce businesses in South and Southeast Asia capable of showing the kind of margins that we have seen in the U.S. tech startup system?
obviously, startups it's a very wide spectrum, but let me just sort of give you some examples of India, Southeast Asia, in the sector that I'm familiar with, which is commerce.
Right.
So it just so happens that the local success stories, all have a commerce flavor to it. So Southeast Asia, you'd probably say C Group, GoTo, Grab.
Yep.
In India, Nykaa, maybe Paytm,
Right.
for parts of it. We've seen C Group demonstrate profitability last quarter, Q4, and that's great news. We need these local stars to shine, because if they don't shine, then it makes things even more difficult for earlier stage startups. The flip side to that is that, and this again goes back to venture capital and the ecosystem, is that you look at Southeast Asia and India as a whole, and there are not that many exits, right?
Not yet, yeah.
Not yet, right? And so you can't compare it to America because it's still early as a region, and e-commerce as a discipline. But we need the local heroes to shine, right? And if you break up commerce, let's say Temu was selling whatever you want to sell, ties, right? If you break up your P&L at the highest level, you'd find that the cost of goods would probably be about 30%. You'd find that logistics and warehousing and the last mile delivery would probably be about 20%. And then the last 50% would probably be advertising costs.
50%.
50%. And that's where the game is being played now. And that's why you're seeing a blurring of boundaries between Facebook, Google, TikTok, content companies, search engines, social media networks, and commerce companies like Alibaba, Walmart, Flipkart, Amazon, etc. Amazon, to give you an example, and don't quote me on this, but maybe I'm off 5%. Amazon makes more profit from its ads business, which is 5 years old at best, than it does from Amazon Web Services, which is a 20-year-old business.
And which is supposed to be the crown jewel.
Which is the crown jewel.
Right.
But has a lot of CapEx.
Correct.
Advertising has no CapEx. Right. And so you'll see a lot of these guys, look at Walmart's latest report, they have never seen the margin like they have in advertising, right? If you look at Alibaba, if you look at the C groups, advertising is making up a huge component of profitability. And why is that? Why have they all been able to do it? Is because they sit on the data.
Yeah.
They know that Temu has bought A, B, and C 21 days ago and is likely to purchase again. They know that Temu has a family account and his wife buys D, E, and F. Yep. And I would say that the power of balance over the next decade is going to shift from Google, Facebook to owners of first-party data. It could be retailers like Amazon, Walmart, could also be banks and credit card companies.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, the truth is that if you were a shareholder in Apple and you were sitting next to Tim Cook, you would ask him, Tim, where's the next $50 billion coming from?
I know the answer.
I'd say there's a 50-50 chance he'd say it's advertising.
Yep. I've been hearing in tech podcasts for the last 1 year that when is Apple going to get in the business, right?
Yeah. And so I think that we've reached 2023 is the inflection point where commerce and advertising have become the same thing. I might be wrong, and correct me if I am, but I think we've reached that stage now.
And of course, all of those things are interlinked with the usage of data and getting intelligent insights and intelligent nudges.
If you have the data, if you sit on the data, you can command advertising dollars. It's as simple as that, because you can prove purchase.
Right. Later in the podcast, I'm going to ask you about this AI-driven search. Will that, disrupt and change the ad industry? But before I go there, I just want to talk about this issue of the likely sort of, the runway that we have ahead in terms of regulation. This banking system problem, the need for regulators to step in, or questions about data privacy and the impact of social media interactions on mental health. All these things are being discussed at length in the political corridors of Washington, D.C. and Europe, elsewhere, so on. Even China, some of the tech regulation that Xi Jinping has undertaken has been in the guise of that, anti-monopoly behavior, privacy, and so on. So how prepared is the tech startup scene to deal with this likely tightening of the regulatory oversight on the sector?
So I think, just to pull back again, I think at a more fundamental level, ask me as an entrepreneur, what would I choose between interest, which a bank provides me on my deposit, or safety? I'll choose safety every day of the week.
Right.
Right? And am I prepared to pay for that? Yes.
Yeah.
Right? So I think you've got to ask yourself whether banking as a business model needs to change a little bit. And fundamentally, the question is, do you want interest and return on your deposit, or do you want 100% sacrifice safety?
Exactly.
So I tell you, as an individual, I may gamble. I'm not going to gamble with investor money. I'll take safety. 7 days out of 7.
Right.
Simple.
Right. And so then if we want the e-commerce system, the data that e-commerce companies use, that to be also absolutely safe. And we start putting more and more safeguards around that, and we make tech companies more liable for the data that they use. Do you see that coming? And if it is coming, how's that? Are the entrepreneurs ready to deal with that?
Yeah, so privacy and data. Let's talk about that a little bit. What's your favorite restaurant in Singapore?
Right now, yes, Baru the Revolver.
So when you walk into a Revolver, you like it when the maitre d' says, "Hey, Timur, here's your table, these are your, we might not have the chicken, but we have this. I think you'll like it." You like that.
Right.
That's one side of privacy, right? And that's sharing of data. The other side is when it becomes creepy and advertising follows you around and things like that. I don't know what the answer is. I think that, you ask my kids, our teenagers, they don't care about privacy like we do.
I agree.
And so the regulators, unfortunately, are more often than not people in the latter part of their lives, and they may not see it the same way as teenagers do. But I think privacy is it's changing the definition of privacy, and time will tell. We've seen what Apple has done to Facebook in the guise of privacy.
This is the opt-in clause that they're putting in after the year, 2 years ago.
Yeah. So now it's every new app you open, you ask whether you want to opt in, and chances are that you're going to say no.
Correct.
Which 9 out of 10 people do. And then that's affected companies like Facebook's ability to serve you advertising.
Right.
And that's what's really caused their stock to implode.
Right.
So privacy is a pretty big debate. I don't know which way it'll play out.
What about this issue related to national security? So India banned TikTok. The US is getting very tough on TikTok. Is under the guise that, their data may be used, American citizens' data would be used by the Chinese government. Your take. Feel free to be controversial.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I think what I do know is this. I think that TikTok is never going to allow them. And if the US and Europe don't allow it, I think TikTok will double down on Southeast Asia. This region of 700 million people will become their primary playground, and it'll become a force to reckon with, both on content and ads and commerce. So watch out for TikTok.
And it's really been transformation, right? The way they deploy their technology.
It's phenomenal. It's AI at its very best.
Right. Right. Okay. Since you mentioned AI, I want to talk a little bit about AI.
Yeah.
Of course, the flavor of the last 3 months has been ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Even yesterday, I asked ChatGPT, using just 2021 data, to give me a synopsis of Silicon Valley Bank's issues and problems. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing that just using 15-month-old data, they flagged the duration risk, they flagged the concentration risk, and so on. So in terms of using AI for search and using AI for the kind of work that you are doing, where do you see the most compelling use cases?
Again, let me just step back and give you because I'm not a tech guy. I'm a business guy. Here's my definition or my understanding of AI. So imagine an Excel sheet with 1 billion rows and 1 billion columns, and every cell moving in real time. And now imagine 1 billion of those Excels, right? The ability to extract the data and pattern match is what we call machine learning, all right? The ability to predict what will happen is AI, right? Now, in ChatGPT or OpenAI, the parent company, we've seen over the last few months. I mean, it's amazing what it can do, but it's still text. I think the next version would probably be video or photography. It'll be text, image, video, right? And that's, I think that's going to happen quite quickly.
So I will ask it to make me a movie about Sachin Tendulkar hanging out with Prem Bhatia in 1997, and it'll do it.
Yeah, or it can be, give me a 40-minute episode of Temur in podcasting and doing an interview with...
In the style of Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it'll be there in, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So what you believe is real is going to change. What is actually real, what is certified. And I think that has impacts on education. I worry about, my children asking me, can I use GPT for this exam? How schools and universities will react. So I think it's a game changer. And I also think that when a company like Microsoft puts $10 billion in it, it ain't looking for a 10x return.
Yeah.
It's looking at something substantially more.
Right.
And I think that it's a very shrewd move, because I think it's going to enable Microsoft, to compete with Google or the browser.
Right.
So it'll be Chrome versus whatever Google comes up with. It'll help Microsoft compete with Amazon for the cloud. And it's going to be a wild ride the next few years.
Sounds like you've already picked a favorite, MSFT.
Yeah, I mean, I think I tell my children, I've got 2 kids. I say, one of you is your future is in the hands of Amazon, and the other of you, future is in the hand of Microsoft.
Prem, agree or disagree that the advent of the internet was subject to too light regulatory touch? As a result, we saw some of the negative aspects of internet proliferate in the last 2-3 decades, and the issue that we were talking about, privacy and so on. And chastened by that experience, regulators will be very, very tough on AI companies that start rolling out these provocative things that you're talking about.
Yeah. How are they going to stop it?
They will make companies liable if your voice is being used in their platform to create a persona that is not yours.
Yeah, difficult one to police tech, right? It's, I mean, not. We saw the Senate hearings on Facebook and privacy.
The senators did not wrap themselves in glory.
AI is going to be infinitely more complicated because we're just starting on that journey. So how a regulator or a senator or a politician is going to be able to play out in their own minds what is coming ahead, I'm not sure they're going to be successful. But yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I think AI is not a pretender. Like some people say crypto and the metaverse were pretenders to the mega trend throne.
Right.
I think AI is the real deal. And I think that at a fundamental level, because it increases productivity, I think it's just going to be an amazing, great thing for the global economy.
Okay. You're convinced that AI raises productivity, and I think it's an easy case to make. Software as services, how does it increase productivity, or does it not always increase productivity?
How does AI increase productivity?
Well, that I think we will agree that, potentially substantial. Yeah. So just as software as services or the subscription business, I can see it's very lucrative from the seller of that service.
Yeah.
But is it always clear that the buyer of the service is seeing significant productivity enhancement?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think SaaS at its most atomic level is you can pay when you want to. You can pay on a daily basis, you can pay on a monthly basis, you can pay on an annual basis. That's really what software, you can eat as much as you can. You remember the old days of software where, IBM and Microsoft, and you were like buying physical servers and CDs, software was on CDs. Yeah. That's all changed because of SaaS, and now software is being delivered over the internet, and you can pay when you want, you can switch it off when you want. And so SaaS is just a sort of a monetization model, I think.
Yeah.
I think here's my bet is that AI will, if you can charge customers based on outcome, which is you are selling something, I offer you my software as a service, but I say, listen, don't pay me every month. Only pay me when it succeeds.
Okay.
Yeah. Tough thing to say no to.
Right.
I think that's what AI enables. I think that just the ability to increase productivity, to automate decision making, I think that's what AI delivers. And it has another implication on labor, which no one wants to discuss.
Exactly.
But the reality is that, most companies, I read this amazing article the other day about you have leaders who give vision in a company, and then you have frontline workers who execute on that vision. And in the middle, you have what is called process managers.
I have read the article too.
Yes, it's amazing.
Yes, and that's going to vanish.
And that is what AI will kill.
Yeah.
Because process management is overhead that isn't required, because you will tie data into workflows and decision making, and it will become instantaneous rather than hours and hours of meetings and things like that.
That's right.
And I think that, at least in the short term, is what's worrying people.
Yes.
Because it may fundamentally change employment and labor.
Well, then my final question is related to that. In your company right now, is it fundamentally changing your notion of labor? And also, how globalized are you? I know that your work is based in South and South Asia, but do you have staff sitting in Silicon Valley and Middle East, elsewhere?
How has it changed our company? We try and run a lean ship. I mean, we have 350 people across 7 countries. But I can tell you that it is already changing our customers and how they perceive it. The customers are turning around to us and saying, I had 9 data analysts, and with your software, I only need 3. We have customers who are saying, I have staff who overlooks commerce on Shopify or Magento or Lazada or Shopee or Flipkart or TikTok. I don't need that many managers because with your...
Because of your solution.
Because I open my laptop, I look at your software at 9 a.m. and by 9:15, I know exactly what I need to do. And that's what the AI does.
Right. So that final bit, do you have employees around the world just beyond the 7 core markets?
No, our employees are in our 7 core markets. And we have consultants and specialists in ML and data science who sit elsewhere. But our employees, we're playing Mumbai to Manila.
Right.
Until further notice.
Further notice. Look, I mean, as I said, sometimes I take sort of pessimist end of the argument. That's why I really enjoy talking to founders who have an optimistic bent. So while I do worry about AI and privacy and so on, I see where you're coming from, Prem. So thank you very much for your time and insights.
Thank you very much, Simo. Good to meet you again. Big fan of the show. And how many episodes have you done now?
We're at 98 now.
98?
Yes.
Oh my God.
It's adding up.
Who is the guest on the 100th?
It will be a surprise.
All right. Well, thanks. So thanks very much for inviting me.
Yeah.
And great chat. Yeah.
Thanks very much. No, I had a great time. Learned a lot. Thank you to our listeners as well. Kopi Time was produced by Ken Delbridge. Violet Lee and Daisy Sharma provided additional assistance. All 98 episodes of Kopi Time are available on Apple, Google, Spotify, as well as on YouTube. It is for information only and does not constitute any investment advice. As for all our research publications and webinars are concerned, you can find them all by Googling DBS Research Library. Have a great day.